Sadly, it's hard to argue against that because our debt is out of control. And if the state government wasn't enough with their war on landlords, you've got a far-left council in the north of Melbourne that, let's not forget, changed its name from Moreland to Marybeck because there was once a Jamaican sugar plantation with slaves called Moreland, so they had to change the name. This council is now considering a plan to double the council rates for landlords. I guess they really do hate renters in Marybeck, Dan, because you're going to make it very difficult and expensive for anyone to rent a property if you press ahead with this crazy policy.
Well, that's right. I mean, obviously, it's just going to make a bad situation worse. That's obvious. I think you wrote about this council a couple of years ago when they were, basically saying Australia Day should be cancelled and they weren't going to celebrate it because it's a day of mourning and so forth. So this is one of the wokest councils that you'll ever come across. And, they're supposed to be in favour of renters. But like you identify, if you put the cost up of constructing dwellings or of having people invest in property, then that's going to flow through. That's what we've seen across the state and across Australia. So, look, I think it's just a matter of time before young people finally wake up to the reality that these councils and these left-wing governments are not acting in the interest of young Australians whatsoever.
Now, last week, Nigel Farage had a milkshake thrown on him in an assault some in the British media called a humbling moment. Some disgraceful reporting there. But now a man has been arrested after Farage was pelted with rocks on the campaign trail. Let's have a look. Now, Farage said that the local police in the Yorkshire village of Barnsley had warned him not to walk through the town. But this is supposed to be Britain. Politicians should be able to campaign without the fear of being assaulted, Dan.
Well, that's right. I mean, it's another example of the victim blaming that we've discussed. It's the job of the police to protect people who want to safely walk through the community, especially politicians when you're leading up to an election. It's vital to a democracy. I think good on the police, though. It looks like they apprehended those individuals pretty quickly there. Look, there's a broader thing here, though, Rita, which is Nigel Farage has been one of the single most consequential figures in Western politics over the last decade. I mean, if it wasn't for Nigel Farage, we wouldn't have had Brexit. We've had basically 14 years of Conservative government in name only in the UK. And I think, regardless of how many seats Reform end up winning, if it's 1 or 5 or 10 or 20, I don't know what it will be. But Nigel Farage has changed debate. He's getting more attention, more publicity than the Conservatives. He's offering a different vision, saying, look, you have to reduce migration, you've got to fix the culture, you've got to fix the broken political system. So, look, he is a force like one we haven't seen for many years. And I think we need more political leaders like Nigel Farage that will make a debate, and speak up for people that don't have a voice in politics.
You're absolutely right about the Tories being a Conservative in name only, and I think they've lost so much trust with their voters. They won in a landslide, but they governed like they were Labor light. And I think Farage is going to change that landscape again. And it's interesting, we've got the UK about to veer to the hard left with a Labor landslide at a time where most of Europe is going to the right, as we saw with the recent EU elections. So it's a fascinating time. Now, news of the Victorian government appointing a parliamentary secretary for men's behavioural change. How Orwellian. Well, it's been mocked far and wide, including by one of our fave comics, Ryan Long. Let's have a look.
Australia has officially appointed a Minister of Men's Behaviour Change, and he looks like a pretty cool guy who I would imagine is swimming in tons of However, because this guy is such a Chad, it appears the Australian government has forgot to appoint a Minister of Women's Behaviour Change. And so, I will be officially appointing myself, Ryan Long, to that position. I will be coming to Australia with my aggressive proposal to assist Australian ladies in improving their behaviour, which will include no more saying you weren't hungry and then eating off your boyfriend's plate. If you wanted that meal, you should have got that meal. This isn't a buffet. No saying they aren't like other girls, then being exactly like other girls. No more posting every moment of your life on social media. You get one post to showcase what you're doing a month, and the rest of the time you're just gonna have to live your life. And no more asking dudes to take the photos either. No more fist fighting with your wife, and that one obviously only pertains to lesbians. Stories about work will now be limited to 1 minute with the stated premise to be delivered within the first 30 seconds. No more shoplifting. Talking behind each other's backs, then pretending to be friends in public will be barred. OnlyFans chicks will only be allowed to scam the same man out of money once. He already got his money, keep it moving. No more turning this sucker into a whale. No more poisoning your husband. Women will only be allowed 1 day a month to have their periods, so whatever changes you gotta make to have that happen before I get there, I recommend you start now.
He's besmirched all of Australia with that policy. It is only just Victoria. But in the interest of equality, will we eventually get a parliamentary secretary for women's behaviour change, Dan, to battle toxic femininity, perhaps?
I wouldn't be holding my breath, Rita, for that to happen. And look, I mean, there's so many things you can say about this, but what I would say is it's just another example of the divisiveness of the Victorian government. That's been a theme of this government, whether it was in COVID, there was two sets of rules. If you were a Black Lives Matter protester, you could go out there and protest. If you were someone that didn't want lockdowns, you were arrested. Whether it's to do with the voice and the treaty process of dividing Victorians, the way they treated small business owners and workers as compared to big business and public servants. This is just another example in a long line of very divisive policies and a very divisive attitude, of the Victorian government. And I just think most people these days have just had a gutful of these sort of gestures where they, don't really understand why someone's getting so much money to take on what is clearly a divisive, tokenistic role. So, look, I think most people will hopefully see through this.